everyone. Welcome to Question Time for week 3 of life. Great to have you with us. I'm Liam. This is Rob.
G'day everyone.
We've just really quite recently got back from our first sort of face-to-face service where a bunch of us got together and watched life together down at the Cruise Centre. So if you can be with us next week, we'd love to have you. We did a COVID-safe gathering. We didn't sing, kept spaced out, and I think we managed to do that pretty well. So well done, everyone. And it was good to get back together. We did have a short question time after after we watched it.
So we're doubling up tonight. So second question time. So what we'll do is we'll transfer those questions that got asked in the first question time onto our live chat so everyone can see them.
And I think you'll get better answers this time round because I've had time to think about it.
Yeah, so that's a win too. Everyone's a winner.
Absolutely.
There you go. But very exciting. So quick kind of recap of this week's life. So I guess we started with the big claim in week 1 that Jesus offers satisfaction, life to the full. Last week we looked at the Bible and its authenticity. Can we trust it? Yes, we can. And so this week...
the problem of sin. So, we dug into what is sin. And ultimately, I think we could see that it's about our striving for autonomy, we want to be the ones who make the rules, and we get that from the garden, from the Garden of Eden story. You see that right from the start. But the symptoms we ran through were that we break God's house rules when we treat others badly. That's actually not only is it hurting the other person, but it's actually breaking God's house rules. Treating God like a doona, which I guess Rob resonated with, packing him in around the edges and only giving him the space after we've put everything else in. And then the third symptom, looking for satisfaction in other stuff than God, saying, God, I know you say you're the one that will provide joy, but I reckon I can find it somewhere else. And putting him as ultimate satisfaction down and finding something else. And they're symptoms that we aren't actually treasuring God. We're not loving God. So that's what we looked at today. And that and because of that, because we say, God, we don't need you, we don't want you, He says, okay, I'll give you that space that you desire forever, which is effectively what the Bible calls hell, this eternal separation from God. So that's what we looked at today. And had a couple of questions come in, a couple of discussions after. Where do you want to start us there?
There we go. My computer was having trouble, isn't it? But everyone else, except Lyndon, seems fine, so there you go.
Okay.
All right, so I was actually with the kids, so I was in there for Q&A, so I get to hear the questions and answers. I gathered, so one of the big questions that came up was, this is a big claim that the truth is found in Jesus, that he's got it and
he's got the answers.
He's got the answers. He's got the line between right and wrong. But most religions would say that, right? So whichever brand of religion you go to, they'll claim to have the truth. So how do we know that this is it? Yeah, and it's not Buddhism or Islam?
That was a really, really helpful question because we're still recovering, I guess, from colonialism. The era of, I guess, Westerners coming in and saying, "Hey, we're right, you're wrong," and a whole bunch of that happened, and so we're having a bit of a reaction against that, and rightly so. We want to be careful not to be doing that, but sometimes that makes it's really tentative to say, oh, well, our culture's right and your culture's wrong, which, as we should be, very tentative to say that. But that's actually the fact that many faiths and many cultures have these ultimate truth claims saying we have it right.
And I mean, we joked about some of the, pineapple on pizza and things that, of course, you can't make an ultimate claim on. But we're talking about the big stuff of life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, and that's, and it really does come down to, yes, there's these ultimate claim. So one I think it's good to recognise. Yeah, we do need that person or thing from outside of any culture to speak in and give us the truth. So that's one of the problems when cultures come up with their own answers, like scorpions or chips are a good snack. Well, we actually need someone other from outside of culture, outside of humanity.
Because when it's food, it's just a matter of taste, but this is right and wrong.
This is
life
and eternal questions, and it comes down to well, at that point, who can prove that they are other? Who can prove that these claims, which faith, which religion, which ultimate truth, can say, yeah, I've got these claims, but where have they come from? Who's got the best evidence to say that these really did come from the divine? They really did come from God. And we're going to be looking at that in a couple of weeks, actually. But just as the teaser, for Christianity, it really hinges on the resurrection of Jesus.
Yeah.
So the Bible last week was really helpful. It shows us that did Jesus do and say these things that the Bible says? Well, we've got an accurate record from the time, but it does come back to the resurrection. If Jesus truly did rise from the dead and backs up the claim that does back up the claim that he's God. And if he didn't, he was just a maniac who thought he was more important than he was.
Yeah. So I guess in short, the answer to the question, how can we know that this is the right and wrong, where the other claims aren't, is it's backed up in history. That we've got this real historical figure with historical authenticity around him.
And he, the things he did proved him to be divine. So Muhammad, real historical figure. And many other religious teachers were real historical figures. But how can we prove that their teaching came from God? Jesus, not only was he a real historical figure, but he really did rise from the dead. Is that a fable or a fact, I guess? So we'll dig that into the next couple of weeks, but that's these truth claims, it's really important. So
it's probably a good spot. So I did have some discussion with people afterwards, and so one of the ones that came up was just around worldview. So that was that same sort of vein that, we saw Carl Pilkington and his worldview on food was very different from that place in China that he was. How do we... I think there's a danger there in confusing our worldview in terms of our culture with Christianity.
Yeah.
That old, we're a Christian nation. People say that a lot. But a lot of the things they mean when they say that...
maybe not very Christian. Yeah. I think that's really helpful to be really careful when we're describing something as being Christian to work out, well, is it Christian or is it just my culture that I think is Christian? So, for example, when the gospel first went to, well, not first, in, I guess, recent years, the last couple of 100 years, when predominantly Westerners from England or then America went to Eastern or African nations with the gospel, they often did bring the truth of Jesus and salvation, but they also brought a whole bunch of culture with them that said, if you're really a Christian, it will mean you wear a suit and tie.
Just like Jesus did.
Exactly. Yeah, and you get some really funny stories like, so a couple in our church I can remember who are missionaries talk about men turning up to church in loincloths and a tie. Because it was you wear a tie to church, and this is the Christian thing to do. Did Jesus want tie?
Where did we get that from? Culture.
It's certainly not from the Bible. They didn't. If we were truly first century, we'd be wearing a sort of more of a Jewish outfit than a coat and tie. So that's something that's slipped across that says to be Christian means to dress this way or look this way. So that we need to be careful.
So my socks and Crocs isn't exclusively Christian.
No, it's not. It's not exclusively Christian. But we do that. I think we can do that with a bunch of things. So the way we eat, the way we gather, even the way we sit and listen. So do churches have to be in rows with someone up the front giving a monologue? Not necessarily, although the New Testament, although it's in a Greek culture, does give us a bit of a standard for how some of that. So it is, even the Bible was written in a culture and it was expressed in that. But yeah, it's an important question to think, what's cultural, what's Christian, and try and take that cultural glasses off and think, okay, I don't want to just assume that this is talking about what I think it's talking about. But then we don't want to go too far the other way either. So the Bible does give us some clear right and wrongs, a clear picture of how we live. So the 2 great commandments, for example, as we saw in the talk, we can't push that off as culture. That's an absolute. Absolutely. And much of our Western culture has been shaped by the Bible. So surprise, surprise, there are things in Australian culture that are or were Christian, that were influenced by that Christian culture. But they get morphed and changed over time, so we need to be a bit careful about that. Yeah, there we go. So lots to keep thinking about there. Keep chatting with people about that one, but we've had a couple more questions come through. Let me start over here. A longer one from one of our older members, as you'll see through the question. I think it's a great question though. So bear with me. It goes, one of the biggest problems or challenges in treating God as God or revering him is that very few people have ever experienced having a God figure, a king or queen or president that we revere or really respect. So he says there was a time when every time God Save the King was played on the radio or in a picture theatre, even if you're at home by yourself, you would stand out of reverence for the king. But today we've got that tall poppy syndrome, and so those tall poppies are hauled down, unless, of course, they're sporting greats. How do we overcome that lack of experience of really revering anything? That's a really big question. Really helpful observations, though. So thanks for that one. I'm not a sociologist, but I think we can make a couple of general comments. I think we need to be careful not to say, it was good to have these, in those words, God figures, like a king or a president who was revered, or that it's really bad to have those God figures necessarily. So as I look on some of the reasons why, especially in Australia, we really do have this tall poppy syndrome where you drag them down. We don't like those God figures because we recognise, rightly, they're just humans. And they don't deserve reverence in that same way. I've been watching and doing a bit more looking into, I guess, the monarchy and stuff, and it's really interesting as you watch whether it's the British monarchy or the Tsars in Russia, it's just seeing how they deliberately kept themselves separate from people and dressed completely in an effort to actually
stand above
and to give the people a bit of the divine, and that was actually articulated in a bunch of the British monarchy stuff. So when people discover, actually, they're just like us. Why? Just because they were born in a palace rather than a hospital, does that mean they're somehow on another level? So in a way, I think it's not unhealthy to have, and that's just my opinion, but I don't think it's necessarily unhealthy not to hold someone in such reverence, because that does reinforce this class difference that they deserve reverence because of their birth or their status, and you go, wow. We actually want to work against that in so many areas. That's why the caste system in India, or the idea of slavery, especially based on race, is another example of this separation because of where you were born or what family you're born into. So I don't want to be too quick to say, it's really good to have those figures because it teaches us how to worship God. But having said that, we don't get reverence now. Even people who deserve honour, I think, in Australia, even if it's not full-on reverence
or respect,
I think we tend to withhold that. more than we should. So it's a tricky one. But the question is, how do we understand revering God and honouring God in a culture where we don't have anyone we revere? And I think it's spending time in the Bible and really meditating, spending time thinking deeply and praying about who God is and what He's done and how different He is to us and how much He deserves our respect and honour. And I think when we spend that time, it will come to us in bits and pieces, sometimes all at once, that wow, God is glorious and He deserves glory, and that awe that we should only have for God and not for any human. I think that will come, and it'll come as we spend time in God's Word.
Yeah. Look, I think one of my favourite stories in the Bible is the one where the disciples are out in the boat with Jesus, and they are fishermen mostly, but this storm comes up. They're so big that they're fearful, they're worried for their lives, and then Jesus jumps up and calms the storm, and they were afraid of the storm. They were terrified of Jesus. But terrified in a way that they kept following him, because they recognised who he was.
But they recognised it was a great
they recognised he's not just some bloke. This is God.
Yeah, I can remember that in Mal Gill. Shout out to Mal at college in our Greek classes. Mal sort of pointing that out, that they're scared, but wow, this is a completely different phrase here. They are terrified, effectively mega scared. Of Jesus. So. Yeah.
And it's not a, run away. It's, wow, I recognise who this guy is.
I want to be in his team. Yeah.
Now we've got a couple more questions come in and some banter. So one of our really old members asked this question.
Who was that?
Really, really old. This person says, I meet non-Christians who seem to have thoroughly godly characteristics and may be kinder and more generous than I am towards others. How does God see their sin? And what about my sin as a Christian? Will it be judged differently?
Yeah, great question. And that really gets to the pointy end of whether we truly believe people are good at heart or not. Now, one of the things the Bible shows us is that any good or morally good action, if it's not done in order to honour God and bring Him glory, it's sinful. So I can be doing something morally good. I can be walking an old lady across the street, or I can be, helping someone else, being generous, being a morally good person. But ultimately, unless I'm doing that in order to honour and bring glory to God, I'm doing that to bring some sort of honour and glory to me, or because I think that's the right thing to do, or because that will make me a good person. So even
which doesn't always seem to be the intention. No.
So and when I say that, I don't think most of the time that's conscious. I'd say that's subconscious, but that's. We looked at that with the sin thing, that even if I'm not going to throw something at Rob's wall, I wouldn't do that. But
I just cleaned it up like 10 minutes ago.
You cleaned it up?
My mother-in-law cleaned it up.
Thanks, Anne. But if I do something in your house that's good, but I don't do it because I'm trying to help you out or in relation to you, well, that's not truly good, is it? I'm just doing what makes me happy or what I want to do. I'm not doing it because I want to be part of your family or because I want to build into that relationship. So I guess that's that first part of the question. It's where if you're not doing something in response to God and what He has done in creation and specifically in Jesus, then it's sin. Now, for Christians, what's the second part of the questions? Will we be judged differently?
Yeah.
And that's, really, really good question. I guess an op chance to say that there is still a judgment for Christians. So now I want to get this really clear quite quickly. That we, in terms of whether we are saved or not saved, whether we spend eternity with God or without God, that is only based on our relationship with Jesus. Do we truly trust Jesus, have faith in Him and follow Him? That's the only category. But once you've been deemed to have faith in Jesus and that credited as righteousness, there is I guess you'd say, a secondary judgment where what we have done is judged, whether good or bad, and in that case, we are rewarded. So it talks about heavenly rewards. It talks about storing up treasures in heaven. So yes, how we behave, even after we are saved, after we start following Jesus, there will be consequences for that in this life and the next. So often we wear the consequences in this life. We see that. But there will be consequences one way or another. That's a much, much longer conversation.
Yeah.
But yes, Christians will be judged in a different way to those who haven't put their faith in Jesus.
Yeah, I think you can wrap it up with the follow-up question that I'd say this person was old, but they're younger than me, so they're very young.
Okay.
Thanks, Ben. So he says, as Christians, should we endeavour to live a good life or a Christ-shaped life, and is there a difference?
Yeah, great. Ian, is there a difference? I think if you're a Christian, your definition of a good life changes. Because a good life for a Christian is a yes, a Christ-shaped life, but a Godward focused life.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of times we can't live a Christ-shaped life. We can't do what Jesus did, and nor are we called to. But we can live a Godward focused life, a focus that is, And
I think in that back to that worldview stuff, we have to be careful that we're not shaped by our culture's view of a good Christian. Rather, we're shaped by what does it actually mean to live for Jesus. Yeah,
and sometimes they'll be the same.
But
sometimes they'll be different.
But we do actually have to
ask that question.
One more. Looks like this will be our last. And again, same sort of vein. What if your motive is just to fill the blanks with the doona and check off doing good on your moral list?
Yeah. Well, if that's the case, it's very hard to make a lay down statement on not knowing the context, not knowing the person, not seeing the fruit. But the fruit of a life like that, and that's the image the Bible uses, that you know a tree by its fruit. You know, an apple tree won't produce pears or whatever it is. There's a whole range of those examples. Treating God like a doona is not the fruit of a converted life, of someone who truly has found their joy in Jesus and satisfaction and is truly following them, just trying to fit him around the edges. So that's not to say that we don't start immature as Christians and grow. We do.
Or that we don't struggle.
Yeah. But if you're content long term without changing to just jam God in at your convenience around the edges, that's not loving the Lord with all your heart, soul, strength and mind. It's not putting Jesus self. It's not taking up your cross and following him. It's none of those descriptors of what a Christian life looks like. It's not really a Christian. I'd say that person needs to come back to Jesus and really examine whether they've put their trust in him or not.
There you go. Well, we've had some great questions. It looks like we've got to them all.
Do we want to talk about the Eden comment?
I don't know.
Oh, you went in question time.
I was in question time.
Oh, yeah. So we had a comment about the Garden of Eden, just the way that God, that the serpent, the tempter, enticed Eve and Adam by saying, "You will be like God." So that was part of his main enticement. Come and eat this fruit and you'll be like God. And later on in that chapter, God actually confirms that that's true. That's what happened when they ate. But I think that the comment was, that's really at the core of what it is to be in rebellion, to want to be like God, to want to take God's place, to want to, we looked at that, to want to be the one to make the rules.
Yeah.
And it was right from the start, 3rd chapter of the Bible. That's where it began. Yeah.
And I think we all know deep down that that's at the heart of our sin is wanting to be the boss. Yeah. I don't want someone else to tell me what to do.
Yeah. And we might not articulate that, but that's how we behave.
So lots that's really good to reflect on. It's a bit of a kind of a downer week, really, in a lot of senses. We're seeing the problem, but let me get you excited for next week as we think about the solution and just the incredible thing that Jesus did on the cross. So we'll wrap up there. I'll go sort that out for you. Oh, he's left me to tell a joke. I don't have a joke. We should really plan this, but we'll see you next time.